June 14th, 2200 hours. Coastal Storm Operations Base, North Atlantic Sector. The official log would later say that crosswinds exceeded safe taxi limits. It would note heavy rain, reduced visibility, and operational pressure. What would not capture was a feeling on a flight line. The way urgency crept into every movement. The way good decisions began to bend under the weight of time. Floodlights swayed in the wind, throwing broken halos across the soaked tarmac. Rain hammered against helmets and ran beneath aircraft skids like restless fingers. Engines spooled up in disciplined stages, each checklist call clipped and sharp. Radios overlapped. Voices tightened. Somewhere beyond the perimeter, the sea was already deciding who would live and who would not. Medics staged stretchers near the hangar doors, plastic covers snapping in the wind. Every minute lost narrowed the evacuation window. Hypothermia did not negotiate. It only counted down. Staff Sergeant Mara Dalton stood just off the line, rain darkening her sleeves, headset tucked beneath her arm to keep it dry. Her posture was neutral, observational. She tracked fuel carts, ground marshals, rotor clearance, not with anxiety, but with quiet calculation. Storm spoke to her in patterns. Vibration through metal, subtle changes in rotor wash, the way crews sped up when they should slow down. 2 ground crew pushed past her and began directing motion that was not theirs to command. One waved her back, telling her to clear the path so pilots could work. The aircraft being positioned was not configured for medevac. The litter mounts were missing. The power distribution would not match the load. Urgency disguised a mistake as necessity. No one paused. The report would later describe rising wind and escalating noise. What would not say was that Mara heard the problem forming the way a mechanic hears a bearing fail before it seizes. She said nothing. Not yet. Mara had learned early that storms had a language. They spoke through pressure, timing, and restraint. She listened the way some people prayed, quietly, without expecting recognition. Her work began before the lights came on and ended after most had gone home. Logs had to be exact. Aircraft remembered every shortcut. She was in her early 30s, posture shaped by long hours and longer nights. Not rigid, just steady. She was the crew chief assigned to storm response birds, the machines that flew when everything else grounded. Her boots were clean only in theory. Her hands moved with the confidence of habit, not nerves. Most people knew only the rumor version of her story. She had transferred from another base after a minor incident. The phrase grew sharper the farther it traveled. By the time it reached this base, it sounded like punishment. No one asked what really happened. It was easier to believe quiet people carried trouble. Mara never corrected them. The truth was simpler. At her last base, she had flagged an imbalance before launch, forced a delay, and pushed the report higher than was comfortable. No crash happened. Everyone came home. The costs arrived later, written politely as reassignment. Systems prefer inconvenience over correction. Here, she did the same thing she always did. She kept tools ordered, logs disciplined, her voice precise. She valued accuracy over explanation. That restraint unsettled some people. Silence looked like softness to those who didn't understand it. Specialist Jonah Reeves noticed her first. Flight line maintenance, grease always under his nails, eager to belong. He repeated rumors without malice, then overcompensated by bringing tools she hadn't asked for. Mara thanked him anyway. First Lieutenant Carter Vale was different. New, confident, fast. He believed speed solved problems. He respected her work, but didn't see her as mission critical. Pilots flew. Crew supported. Clean categories. Helicopters did not recognize categories. Senior Chief Raymond Hill watched her carefully. Years on coastal bases taught him to distrust optimism. He respected experience, but distrusted transfers. He waited to see what pressure would reveal. Sergeant Lee Torres ran the medics with sharp efficiency. She didn't dislike Mara. She disliked delay. To her, anything slowing launch felt like sabotage when patients were bleeding or freezing. The friction stayed quiet. Jokes passed. Raised eyebrows followed her transfer story. Someone once asked if she'd been on a real mission. She let it pass. There was work to do. What no one noticed was the laminated card in her chest pocket. Not a badge. A checklist. Handwritten notes from years of storms. Fuel behavior in crosswinds. Hydraulic quirks by tail number. How litters shifted under turbulence if straps were misaligned. It wasn't doctrine. It was memory. The first distress call came broken by static. A trawler had rolled in heavy seas. Flare seen once, then lost. Hypothermia began its countdown. Command language shifted from assessment to orders. Launch time moved forward. Safety margins were quietly reinterpreted. On the hangar floor, that pressure felt like a hand pushing on everyone's backs. Checklist became background noise. Lines blurred. Mara felt it before anyone said it. Jonah jogged instead of walked. Tools were dropped and left messy. Hydraulic carts squealed unchecked. Pages flipped without fingers tracing lines. Vale emerged from the briefing room half-strapped, helmet under one arm, eyes already on the aircraft. Hill tried to slow him for confirmation. Vale waved him off. The storm was eating their margin. They had to move. The colonel upstairs made the call. Proceed. Fuel trucks rolled in sequence. Mara stepped closer, watching connections. Storm fueling demanded precision. Crosswinds played tricks with distribution. She watched gauges climb, felt the subtle thud through her boots. Something didn't fit. She checked the tail number against her laminated card. The fueling pattern matched the transport profile, not medevac. Center of gravity would shift under turbulence. Maybe manageable. Maybe not. The storm would decide. She flagged Jonah quietly. He saw it too. He hesitated, glanced toward the operations door. Then his radio crackled. Time lost. He flinched and told fuel operators to finish. We'll adjust in flight. Mara closed her mouth. This wasn't the moment to argue with a specialist. Inside the cabin, stretchers were being rushed into place. Straps threaded carelessly. Torres snapped orders, impatience cutting sharp. Mara stepped toward the ramp to assess layout. A junior NCO blocked her by reflex. Crew only beyond this point. She held his gaze, then tapped the crew chief patch on her chest. It didn't matter. He had already decided who belonged where. She stepped back, not because he was right, because adding friction now would feed the current pulling them toward a worse mistake. She looked through cockpit glass at Vale running checks from memory. Fast, efficient, dangerous with incomplete information. Paperwork moved down the line. Initials filled boxes like falling dominoes. No one cross-checked configuration with fueling. The system trusted urgency. Urgency trusted luck. Mara felt a familiar shift, the moment when small concessions stacked into something heavier. She walked the length of the aircraft, hand on the skin, feeling balance through vibration. The laminated card pressed against her chest. Wind slid sideways, worrying loose anything not secured with intent. She corrected what she could reach. Refed a strap so it distributed pull instead of tearing. Clipped down a flapping cover. Stopped the crate from rattling. Fraction by fraction, risk decreased. No one noticed. Things simply stopped going wrong. The rotors began to turn. Rain sliced horizontal. Instruments climbed green. Then a hydraulic indicator flickered. Vale tapped the panel. Sensors jumped in weather like this. The flicker returned longer this time. Someone called commitment. Clear the area. Mara stepped forward before anyone could stop her. She slapped the fuselage twice, hard enough to cut through the storm. Vale looked up. She signaled shutdown. Protests filled the intercom. They were cleared. They were late. Hill demanded an explanation. The junior NCO bristled. Mara met Vale's eyes and shook her head once. The warning flickered again, undeniable. Vale cut the sequence. Engines wound down. Anger rolled across the line like a second storm. Torres swore. Jonah looked sick. The colonel demanded answers. Mara climbed one step up the ladder and spoke calmly. It wasn't a sensor glitch. Storm-induced microcorrections were outpacing hydraulic equalization. With the current fuel distribution and cabin setup, the tail would lag under torque on lift. A crosswind at the wrong moment would create unrecoverable yaw at low altitude. Math. Physics. No drama. Silence followed. Hill stared at the tail, Then the windsock snapping sideways. Explain the fix. Mara did. Rebalance fuel. Correct litter axis. Lock the sensor properly. Reset stabilization. Rerun startup slower. It would cost minutes. Crashing would cost everything. Hill nodded. Do it. The line moved again, but now with purpose. Mara worked the hydraulic panel, reseating the sensor until it clicked true. She directed Jonah through fuel rebalance. Numbers settled. The tail behaved like an answer instead of a question. Inside, she adjusted litters by inches. Torres watched straps fall silent. Vale leaned out. Where's my crew, Chief? Hill answered, weather grounded. Won't make it. I'll crew it, Mara said. No bravado. Just fact. Authorization came quickly. Time pressed, but now it worked for them. Startup ran again. Slower. Confirmed. The aircraft lifted clean. The storm fought back, but the machine answered steadily. Respect didn't arrive as applause. It arrived in small recalibrations. Vale waited for Mara's calls. Torres trusted the hover. Jonah watched differently. Over the search grid, the storm grew vicious. Gusts shoved laterally. Vale corrected too hard, then froze between inputs. Mara spoke softly. Crosswind on 3. Ease pedal. Let the tail breathe. He followed. The helicopter steadied. Survivors came up one by one. Timing mattered more than force. Mara read the pattern and called it. The last man cleared the rail as the storm howled its disapproval. They flew home battered but intact. On the pad, Colonel Adrian Ross stepped onto the line. He spoke briefly to Vale and Torres, then turned to Mara. Staff Sergeant Dalton, he said, naming her precisely. Well done. No applause followed. The storm didn't care. By morning, puddles filled the tarmac. The fishermen were alive. Reports circulated. A safety memo referenced timely intervention. Names appeared later. Rumors about her transfer lost oxygen. Mara cleaned her tools. Logged her notes. Added one line to the laminated card. Crosswind coaching helps pilots hear the aircraft. She tucked it away and went back to work. Because true authority doesn't shout. It shows up when it matters.